Welcome to For the Record. I'm Sheldon Ingram. This morning, our focus on the 2024 primary continues. In the weeks leading up to the election, we are hearing from the candidates from a number of races. They share with us their policy platforms and why they believe they are the right person for the job. The primary election here in Pennsylvania, just weeks away. Two local military veterans looking for their shot to represent southwestern Pennsylvania in our nation's capital, addressing topics ranging from immigration to reproductive rights to inflation.
The tool Congress has is tax policy. We need to cut taxes for working families and put money back in their pockets as soon as possible.
Going one-on-one with the Democratic candidates for Pennsylvania's 14th congressional district to give them the chance to tell you why they believe they deserve your vote.
I'm going to listen to the people of the district and work for the people of the district. And that's, I believe, what politicians need to start doing.
And a crowded field of candidates on the ballot to be the next Pennsylvania Attorney General. We're talking with former Auditor General Eugene DePasquale about why he believes what he has accomplished in his career makes him the right person for the job.
What I've seen through my elected periods of time is that one person can make a dramatic difference if you're willing to be persistent and have guts.
His priorities if he secures the nomination to move on to the general election and beyond. First, we're hearing from candidates running for Pennsylvania's 14th congressional district. This district is a large one. It covers all of Fayette, Greene, and Washington counties, and most of Indiana, Westmoreland, and Somerset counties. It's currently represented by Guy Reschenthaler, in office since 2019. He is running unopposed on the Republican side. The Democrats on the ballot are political newcomers Chris Jados and Ken Bate. Jados is an Iraq combat veteran and a retired Army major. He says his experience fighting for our freedom puts him in a unique place to fight in Washington, D.C. We're joined by Chris Jados, who is running for the 14th congressional district, and where Guy Reschenthaler is now sitting. Chris, why don't you share with us why you're running for Congress?
Yeah. So I just retired from the Army after 20 years of service. I started my career doing 2 combat tours pretty much back to back in Iraq, followed by working with the Air Force, develop defense satellite systems, and then working in Europe with our NATO partners and allies to ensure European security. And then later in my career, the last 5 years of my career, I spent in the Pentagon developing national security policy. So I've spent my entire adult life, working to defend democracy. And I think, we're at a bit of a crossroads right now in America. We moved towards looking for the easy answers on some of these more complex problems, which have given rise to, unfortunately, you look back to the previous administration, the end of the previous administration, and the election, and not accepting the results of a free and fair election, and I think, and that has permeated through a portion of the American society.
And who was that person you're referring to? Let's just be on the record.
Yeah, the previous President Trump.
Okay.
So I think you are, and oftentimes those easy answers end up, vilifying certain, segments of the population and not providing providing easy answer versus, what this is. None of this is easy. These are hard problems that require, hard work and compromise, and, isn't just a simple, easy answer that is somebody else's problem.
So looking at your policy platform, the first thing that you have at the top is protecting women's reproductive rights. What exactly are you going for there?
Yeah, so that is, women should have control of their own reproductive rights, full stop. And if elected, I would work to codify that in a federal law.
Let's talk about the economy right now and inflation, gas prices, the price of food. So you refer to former President Donald Trump as someone who wants to be an authoritarian. At the same time, people will point to President Biden in that inflation has soared under his watch, in that gas prices have soared under his watch. How do you address inflation, gas prices, the price of food, things that matter to to the pocketbook of the average American?
Yeah, so I mean, inflation is obviously a real problem affecting working families. People are having trouble, putting gas in the tank and food on the table. And right now, the tool Congress has is tax policy. We need to cut taxes for working families and put money back in their pockets as soon as possible. On the backside, you have greedflation. People are paying the same for getting less, and we've seen corporate profits explode on the backs of consumers.
Pennsylvania has an infrastructure, or particularly southwestern Pennsylvania has an infrastructure situation that we're looking at that's unique to us in our area with the bridges. And you mentioned in your platform about President Biden's his allotment of money for infrastructure across the country, how it would produce jobs and things of that nature. How do you view the infrastructure in southwestern Pennsylvania, and is there a remedy to address some of the challenges with our roadways and some of the challenges with our bridges? How do you assess that situation?
We spent decades ignoring these infrastructure issues, and they've come home to roost. And this is seen, a year or two ago out in Philadelphia, as well as, you can just drive down the road here and you can see the decay of the roads. The President's Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act is going to put money back into infrastructure in the area, as well as bring good paying jobs, skilled labor, good paying family sustaining jobs back to, hometown USA, as well as, which is, Southwest Pennsylvania.
So what is it about Guy Reschenthaler that is compelling you to run for his seat?
Going back to the 2020 election, he voted not to certify the election for President Biden, and he ran uncontested in 2022. So nobody called him out on not certifying the 2020 election, which is undermining people's trust in our democratic institutions. Which I go back to earlier. When you undermine people's trust in our democratic institutions, they look for the answers, and someone is out there trying to provide those easy answers, and none of this is easy. So with respect to Guy, he needs to be called out on the fact that he is part of that group undermining our democratic institutions. And I've spent 20 years of my life, my entire adult life, defending democracy. And right now, running for Congress is simply an extension of what I've done my entire adult life.
You're watching For the Record. We're back right after this. Welcome back to For the Record, a focus on Commitment 2024. More now on the race for the seat representing Pennsylvania's 14th Congressional District. We're hearing next from Democrat Ken Bache. He is a U.S. Navy veteran who answered the call to serve at 17. Now a small business owner, he says he understands the people that he wants to have a voice for in the nation's capital. Why do you want to run to represent this 14th Congressional District?
I believe that someone like me who, my parents got divorced when I was a kid, grew up, joined the Navy, got out, met my wife. We struggled to get pregnant. We had to go through all the things to get pregnant. We ended up getting pregnant, having 2 kids within 11 months, raised them. My wife's the greatest person in the world. She works at Mercy. She dealt with COVID. She's a respiratory therapist. I have life experiences that help me understand the people of our district and work for the people of our district. Now, I can't sit here and say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do that. What I'm going to tell you is I'm going to listen to the people of the district and work for the people of the district. And that's, I believe, what politicians need to start doing to fix and make people understand that Congress is working for them. And I will do that.
What are the unique concerns for the people of the 14th Congressional District?
The rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. And we have to fix that issue. The people of the 14th are affected by that. And we have to find a way to raise up the people that are working like crazy, basically the working poor of our district, we have to help them come along and so that we don't have the issues that I fear we're going to have.
So that's a nice philosophical approach, but tactically, politically, what mechanism?
Politically, it's going to be very difficult.
And so how do you begin with that?
Winning the election and then going to fight for them for that. That's the only way this is going to change, is that the ultra wealthy control who's in Congress now. So we have to get down. Like I tell the story, when I tell people I'm running, people in power in politics, what do you think the first question they ask me is? When I tell them the rich are controlling politics, the first question is, well, how much money have you raised?
Okay, now
and that's the problem. It comes down to the money instead of representing the people.
How do you address the situation with immigrants coming across the border?
No one wants to do anything because their side believes this or their side believes that. We have to work together. We have the dreamers. We can't even agree to give the dreamers the opportunity to be citizens. How is that? How is that? These little kids don't even speak the language of the country that so many want to send them back to. So we can't agree. We have to agree on the dreamers first, come up with an answer for them. Then the immigrants, we have to understand the issue of why the immigrants are coming. Why are they coming? They are coming because their country is terrible, okay? The issues that they are dealing with are terrible. How do we help that? To stop them from coming, you have to try to do something to improve their life at home.
Let's look at the infrastructure of bridges here in southwestern Pennsylvania. A lot of them are in need of repair in the metropolitan area of Pittsburgh and then in the surrounding counties. Do you have an assessment of the condition of the infrastructure and how it should be addressed in the near future?
Well, of course we need to. We must maintain what we have and grow for the future. That it's not intelligent at all to not repair what we have. And so, yes, we need to invest in infrastructure for the future.
Inflation and the rate of inflation. What's your assessment of it now, and how do you approach it if you are elected into Congress?
Where it's at right now is a lot better than it was. Coming out of COVID, yes, prices of everything went up. I mean, that's what I own, an auto repair shop, so I see it. I see people getting smacked with high repair costs on their car, and it affects them. I understand what it's doing to their pocketbooks and what's happening. And like, for me to say I have some like silver bullet that's going to fix everything, I don't necessarily have that. I believe that it's going to take working together with, because what we have in Congress right now is no one wants to work together. We have to work together, find answers that we can all live with to help.
How do you control inflation as we see it right now?
That's a tough one, okay? What we have is, I believe for years, we've let these massive mergers occur, so the big corporations basically are running everything. So there's no competition anymore like there used to be. So without the competition, they can just raise prices. I mean, I'm in business, I see it. What I say is the companies go, oh, let's try another 10%, and let's see if they keep on buying.
You're watching For the Record. We're back right after this. Welcome back to For the Record, a focus on commitment 2024. Now we're shifting to the race for Pennsylvania Attorney General. Right now, there are 7 people on the ballot, Republicans and Democrats. Today, we're hearing from Eugene DePasquale. He is a former Pennsylvania Auditor General and member of the State House. He told our Janelle Hall that experience puts him in the right position for AG.
Tell Tell us a little bit about who you are for people who may not know much about you. We know you're from Pittsburgh.
Right.
We know a little bit of your political background. What pushed you to get into politics, and in particular this race?
So I am the only candidate from Pittsburgh. Grew up in the city, went to college in Ohio, played some baseball and football there, came back, got my graduate degree at Pitt. And what I really thought, as I was putting myself through night law school, is that one of the ways that you can actually go help people through the law. And so that really gave me a passion to be a different type of an attorney, to look out for people that were being, maybe had to deal with environmental pollution, people that maybe had zoning issues. So I've really had an interesting legal career in that sense. But following the 2005 pay raise, that's what prompted me to run for office. And there was a whole slew of us, both Republican and Democrat, that ran that year to try to really shake up Harrisburg. We rewrote the state open records law. I became the first legislator to post my expenses online. Boy, that made me popular inside the Capitol. I authored the Alternative Energy Investment Act. So all the solar panels that you see going up across Pennsylvania today, that started with my legislation in 2008 that was signed into law by the governor at that point. And also it was my legislation eventually that became known as the texting while driving ban, to try to make our roadways safer. And those are some of the things I accomplished as a state legislator. But I thought the state was on the wrong track following the election of Governor Corbett and some of the education cuts. So I decided to run for Auditor General. And what I did in that role was I had 8 years where I was able to protect Pennsylvanians. It was my investigations that found over $2 billion wasted by Harrisburg. I found over 3,000 untested rape kits, clearing that backlog and bringing justice to victims, and also finding 58,000 unanswered phone calls at the child abuse hotline. So working to make sure that our children were better protected. And so what I've seen through my elected periods of time is that one person can make a dramatic difference if you're willing to be persistent and have guts.
So you talk about protecting Pennsylvanians. If you're elected as Attorney General, how do you plan to protect Pennsylvanians in terms of consumer rights?
I already have a record on this. I've taken on big pharma, that are doing price gouging. I mean, we pay more for pharmaceuticals in the United States than anywhere else in the world, even though we're producing a lot of these drugs. So I've investigated that. That's something as Attorney General, I'll just have more tools to take that fight on. One of the big passions I have, look, I had a father who was wounded in Vietnam, eventually became incarcerated due to addiction issues. And so I know this opioid epidemic is personal to so many people. And so one of the things that I want to make sure people know is that I've already investigated all of our drug rehabilitation programs in the state. I know what works and what doesn't.
When Governor Shapiro was Attorney General, he had to navigate the 2020 election meddling claims, as you know. So if that situation comes up again, how do you ensure the future of fair elections and transparency here in the state?
Partly by, number one, you have to start with the principle of the person that gets the most votes wins. The voters should pick, not the politicians filing lawsuits. So my job as Attorney General, because I would be transitioning into office then if I win, is to make sure that our legal team is holding Pennsylvania law to the standard it's held, which is what's the intent of the voter, any legal voter that cast a ballot, making sure that vote is counted accurately, and then making sure that someone who loses doesn't just try to drag it out simply through frivolous lawsuits. When I was Auditor General, I investigated our voter registration security system going into the 2020 election to make sure it was more secure.
How do you see the role of Pennsylvania Attorney General, and what specifically do you think that you'd like to tackle day one?
So I view it as being the people's lawyer. As I say on the stump, that for the 1% of people, 2%, whatever it is, that can hire their own big-time law firm, their own big-time lawyer, maybe you don't need me as Attorney General. But for the other 98, 99% of people that can't afford that, then I want to be their lawyer, making sure we're protecting the environment, protecting consumers, defending abortion rights, and protecting our democracy. Then there's really going to be three priorities moving forward. That is going to be consumer protection, the environment, and reproductive freedom.
When it comes to gun violence, safety is always a top issue.
Right.
When we hear from so many Pennsylvanians and just people across the country, whether that's in their neighborhoods or in their schools. What specifically do you think you could do to try to tackle some of these issues to make people feel safer, but also protect freedoms for other people?
Right. And I believe we should have comprehensive background checks I also believe that we should make sure that civilians don't have access to military-style weapons. But as Attorney General, you have to enforce the law. One of the things we can absolutely do, and I'll continue the work of the former Attorney General, now Governor Shapiro, that is cracking down on ghost guns that are actually illegal in Pennsylvania. But one of the things that I think we need to get better at is going back and get the dealer that sold that gun illegally and hold that person responsible as well. The final thing I want to talk about with guns, and obviously this is a much more complicated, broader topic, is that 2/3 of all firearm deaths in Pennsylvania are the result of suicide. One of the things I want to fight for as Attorney General, what are known as red flag laws, where you can temporarily, I want to be clear, temporarily take away someone's right to a firearm that's having a mental health challenge, where they're a threat to themselves or a loved one or the neighborhood.
What do you think separates you from the other candidates at this point?
I'm the only one that's run statewide twice and won twice. But beyond that, I have a record of protecting Pennsylvanians in every single county in this state. You take the horrific shooting at Stoneman Douglas. After that, Governor Wolf and myself led the School Safety Task Force, investigating school safety plans in every single county in this state, every single school district, to make sure students were better protected. I was the only one, in fact, not only am I the only one that tackled the untested rape kits, but I worked across the country with other state auditors and other prosecutors to help them also clear that backlog. So that's the type of leadership I've already brought to the state of Pennsylvania, and I'll continue to do as Attorney General.
You're watching For the Record. We're back right after this. Welcome back to For the Record. If you have a topic you'd like us to address, send us an email to news@WTAE.com. You can also rewatch this episode or any episode with the Very Local app on your smartphone, tablet, or smart TV. Thank you for joining us and have a good week.